I'm kind of new to New York, so I didn't realize what a New York summer meant. We're like a subtropical climate now. I didn't understand the full extent of that. Let me just tell you what happened to me this summer. Hopefully your summer went a little bit better than this. I was in the month of July between apartments and needed a place to stay. And I had one of the best, amazing friends that told me, hey, I've got a room you can stay in. I'm not going to be there for a few days. I'm house sitting, but here's the key to my place. Just stop by whenever you need to. Just stay there. The only problem is there's no AC. Yeah, see, you know where this is going. See, in Pittsburgh, I was like, it'll be fine. It's at night. It cools down. In Pittsburgh, okay? I didn't realize that doesn't happen in New York. So I get there probably really late. It was like around midnight. I get up to the room. I open up the door, and there I am, the middle of the sun. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to get through this. So I make it through night one. I'm trying my best. I'm like, okay, this is fine. Like he's so nice letting me stay here. So I make it through night one, and then I get through the whole day, and do I do anything different? Absolutely not. We get to night two, same thing. I open up the door. I'm like, what am I doing? So night three comes, and I'm on FaceTime with one of my friends at that point. I'm writing my will because I don't think I'm going to make it much longer. I'm like, we're done. This is how it ends for me. And I'm on FaceTime with them, and they're like, well, how hot is it in there? And I'm like, it's 91 degrees. Like, how do you know the temperature, Colin? And I was like, the humidifier over by the window. It says it's 91. Yeah, you guys know. Yeah, okay. See, at that point, I was like, the humidifier says it. And if you've ever said something before and you know, like, I might be an idiot. Because I went over and I looked at the humidifier, and I'm like, yeah, I have a feeling it's not a humidifier. So I hit on and then just got blasted with cold air. This guy who was so nice to let me stay there was so nice to think that I was smart enough to know what it was. And I, in fact, did not know. It was right there in the room the entire time. There was air conditioning there the entire time. I'm telling you this because part of why I wanted to share this story was I think that just like I didn't know there was an AC unit in that room, I think for some of you, you might not realize just how close Jesus is in your life right now. And what I want to do for you today is be that person that's able to come into your room of your life and be able to say, hey, right here, right in this moment, God is here. He's present with you. And really the whole place that I'm coming up with this concept, this whole idea is coming from a specific psalm that we're going to look at. So while we're in this series of Summer in the Psalms, I want to look at a specific psalm that talks about the presence of God, talking about how safe it is, about how present he is with us. We're going to be looking at Psalm 84, just at the first 4 verses together. We're going to read through this. It's going to be on the screen, but if you want to find it for your own, you can do that as well. Psalm 84. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of heaven's armies. I long, yes, I faint with longing to enter the courts of the Lord. With my whole being, body, and soul, I will shout joyfully to the living God. Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow builds her nest and raises her young at a place near your altar. O Lord of heaven's armies, my King and my God, what joy for those who can live in your house, always singing your praises. This is a really important psalm. To understand really the gravity of the statements being made, we're going to do some Bible study together. And I know you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not a theologian. What we were taught in Bible school was that when we look at the Bible, we need to study it with the same intentionality that you do your text messages. And some of you know if somebody's mad at you just by how they wrote okay. You know, oh, was there a period? Did they write the whole word? Was it just the letter? You know. So we're going to look at this specific passage, just these 4 verses, just to get some context on this, okay? So what I want you to look at is there's a specific phrasing that's saying here. It says, I faint with longing to enter. There's some context clues we can pick up from this psalm of what's taking place. This is somebody who is looking at a distance, saying, I see that Jesus is probably over there. I want to be close to him. But right now there is distance. This psalm is written at a distance because here was the reality, was that human beings and God couldn't be in the same room. They couldn't be present. And when I'm saying present, I need you to really key in on that word for a second, because when we look at the Bible's written in 2 parts. There's the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament being the way that our relationship with God used to function, the New Testament being the way that it functions today. The person writing this in Psalm 84 is writing this in the Old Testament, in which human beings could not be in the same room as God. See, what happened was sin created this major separation, this separation between human beings and God, human beings and one another, human beings even in themselves. We have this massive separation that's taking place. And the way that this was managed was through this place called the tabernacle. This beautiful picture of this place in which people were able to come close to God, but at a distance. And we have this writer of the Psalms who's looking at a distance saying, man, I can't imagine what it would be like to be in the same room as God. How amazing it would be if I could just enter into that place where I could just be close to him. And the writer of the Psalm, again, is in the Old Testament. We don't live in the Old Testament era. We live in the New Testament. We live in the era in which Jesus has come to this earth, died, and is alive today. And the reality we live in is something that this psalmist would only dream of. The reality that we get to be face to face with Jesus. Can we just for a moment think about this? This is somebody from a distance who's saying, I have such a love for God that I want to be that close to him. Today, do we have just that sense of awe of the reality of how close we can be to Jesus? Can I ask you, do you really want to be close to Jesus? Because a lot of us, if I can just be honest, live like we're in the Psalm 84 era. We live putting limits on where and when we will encounter moments with Jesus. It's as if our relationship with him is one in which we've put limits on it, and we're almost okay with that, if we're only going to encounter God at church. But if God starts showing up in other parts of my life, I get a little bit uncomfortable because I didn't give him permission to do that. And I know for some of us, we get a little bit like confused of, how do I develop a relationship with somebody that I can't see though? And can we just be very honest for a second? We live in a world where today's, some of our closest relationships are ChatGPT, okay? Where we are perfectly okay with divulging loads of personal information on this situation happened, what should I do? And yet when we get to a moment whenever we're supposed to pray, we're like, but I can't see God, what should I do? Let's just be honest. We're afraid some moments of what would it be like if I was actually face to face with Jesus. Would it be that if I stood in the same room with him, he would just look at me and tell me how disappointed he is with me? How much he's mad at me? How much I haven't been living up to my potential? Is it possible that we're living in fear? And let's just be honest, it's much more easier to avoid these moments and put them in a really nice spot on Sunday where we'll encounter God, rather than have the opportunity to engage with God daily at any moment. I mean, this is what the psalmist was talking about here, how much he longed to be in the presence of God with his whole body, with his whole soul. Could there be something more that's happening in this psalm than just a guy who's a little bit more of a religious person? Could it be that he encountered something, saw something about the presence of God that maybe we've missed? I want to just be an encouragement for you today, because if you hear nothing else, here's the main point of this message. It's that being in the presence of God is the safest place for me to be. This isn't typically how we look at it, but I guarantee you, as we even dig into this psalm a little bit more, you'll see it, that being in the presence of Jesus is the best place for me to find strength, is the best place for me to find rest. It's the best place for me to be. And what I would love is for us to be able to have that same passion, that same desire that the psalmist had to say, I just want to be close to Jesus. So what I want to do is just talk through about the presence of God today from this psalm, and looking at how safe the presence of God really is. The first thing I want to share with you is this, is that being in the presence of Jesus isn't about a location. It's not about a location. Again, this psalmist was looking most likely at the tabernacle, was looking at this place that housed the presence of God, but he wasn't so much fixated on the place, he was fixated on the person inside of that place. Let's talk for a moment, not about just what we believe, but just our behaviors. Because our behaviors, so much of the time, would lead us to believe that Jesus is actually only in one place, or maybe in a few designated spots. And we've come to believe and act in certain ways as if we're only going to encounter Jesus at church. Let me kind of switch this up, because I know even this verbiage might be a little bit odd, but let me ask you this. Do you have an expectation that you might be able to encounter Jesus outside of this room? Do you have an expectation that just maybe our God, who the theological word for this is omnipresent, that he is able to be with each and every one of us individually present? Do you have an expectation that he would be able to do that with you at any place? Do you have the same expectation that for those of you who have had moments with God here in this church, here in this specific room, have you had the same expectation that it wasn't just here, but also at home, that you could have this very real personal relationship with God? Or do your behaviors indicate and speak a different statement that maybe only Jesus is in one location? See, when I read about Jesus in the Bible, whenever I read in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what I read is a God who has no limitations on where he is and who he's interacting with. Quite honestly, most of the time I see him interacting in places he shouldn't have been, to people he shouldn't have talked to, doing miraculous things that nobody would have expected, purely because it was in a new place and it was a different spot. But again, it's not about the location. It's about the person. It's about Jesus. Let me just say this. You might not even be aware of this, but whenever you have these moments outside of different locations with Jesus, people are sensing not just that places are different, that people are different. Because when you're near Jesus, people can tell. You might not be able to recognize this, but there's a difference whenever you leave this place and you go somewhere else. People can see something. It's almost like whenever your friends start acting in an odd way and you're like, I know they're hanging out with that person again. I know that. Those of you who are parents, you know whenever your kids are hanging out with the troublemaker kids, okay? We're not going to say their names, but you know which kid it is. People can tell in the same way whenever you've been around Jesus. They can tell because in the Bible, locations were marked, locations were changed, but God is not as concerned with seeing a location transformed as much as he is seeing you transformed. He's not fixated just on one place. This is what the psalmist was looking at over and over again, not just at the place, but the person, because, hear this, the presence of God is an invitation to make things personal, not just artificial. You might have even been in church for a while and felt like this just feels fake. Have you made it personal for yourself? Or has it just been all fixated around a location? This is the beginning of what the psalmist was looking at. Let's continue on though, because what I love so much is that being in the presence of Jesus, this is the second thing I want you to hear. Being in the presence of Jesus isn't about my presentation. Man, I need you to hear this point so much, because it's not about just how you look. What I love in Psalm 84, there's a lot of these visual references that are in there. One of them, he talks about birds, okay? Now, why would the psalmist put birds in there? Why would he talk about birds? See, especially in biblical times, birds weren't necessarily like the symbol of strength. It was much more the symbol of weakness in a lot of ways, of this very weak, fragile creature. But can I tell you, I was a fifth grade science teacher for a year. Can I tell you about the swallow, that bird that's mentioned in there? This is a bird whose nest, the way that it's made is it takes up these clumps of mud and dirt in its mouth, mixes it with its saliva, and then projects it onto a wall. It's cool. It's also disgusting, okay? It's disgusting, okay? And whenever we're talking about the tabernacle, we're talking about this place that you can read. There's books of the Bibles that go through all of the different regulations. You needed to look like this. You needed to have all these different things in order. Again, not out of favoritism, but out of the management of our sin in the Old Testament. And yet the psalmist is looking at this and understanding all of these laws and going, even that messy bird, even that weak bird is able to find home in the presence of God. Man, I'm so thankful about the fact that even when my life is a mess, I'm still able to be at home in the presence of God. Can I just be very vulnerable with you for a moment? See, I grew up in church, and for so many of my years as a teenager, I struggled with an addiction to pornography that whenever I would come into church, this actually didn't feel like the safest place. This felt like the most unsafe place. Because whenever I would come in here, I would start to feel like all of the feelings of my guilt and shame were just God. I wouldn't be able to differentiate well of coming into this place and having a sense of, oh, I'm safe with God. No, I felt just completely overwhelmed of, man, every time I'd mess up, every time I'd relapse, every time I'd feel like I am just the worst person in the world, all that I'd walk in here and feel as if God was just pointing the finger at me going like, yeah, you're awful. You're a mess. You're horrible. Those were my feelings. Hear me on this. That wasn't God. And if we can just be honest for a second, I think there's some of us who even on Sunday mornings have had times where we've woken up with the anxiety going, I don't know that I have the energy to put on my best today. I don't know that I have it in me to get my attitude together. I just don't know that I have it in me. To the point that I think some of us might have skipped church sometimes or multiple times. We might have skipped out on our Bible reading. We might have skipped out on times of prayer. We might have skipped out on coming to the front, asking somebody to pray for us simply because we were too concerned with our presentation. And I get it. Sometimes when we talk about church, the idea is I need to bring my best. I need to put on my nicest clothes. I need to have my best attitude. Yes, we want to obviously do our best at times, but hear me on this. This is the place for you to bring your mess. This is the safest place for you. Hear me on that. And I just want to recap for a second the good news for you today. For those of you who especially have felt that, the good news is your presentation was never enough. The good news was that in our mess right here, we had a God that loved us so much that he came down from a perfect place to us and died on a cross and is alive today to bring us now into the perfect presence that he now dwells in. Your presentation wasn't enough, and it doesn't have to be. We're not relying on ourselves anymore. We're relying on the fact that we have a God who did the work for us and had the most perfect presentation for us. The saddest part, though, is I know that some of us, this hasn't been your experience in church. This hasn't been the thing because of whatever experiences you might have had previously, because of maybe a bad interaction. But as I was praying for you today, I really felt like the Holy Spirit just put something on my heart that I want to encourage you with. Because I know that for some of you, you may have never felt like there was a space or a place that you were good enough for. That you've had to dress a certain way, talk a certain way. In some instances, that's probably even cost you financially or socially in ways that didn't even give you the validation you were looking for. And because of that, you've come to church focusing on the presence of other people instead of on God. And because of that, you've struggled to ever feel comfortable in church. I believe God is saying this to you today specifically. That his presence is more safe than you've ever experienced. Right here in front of him is the safest place to be vulnerable, the safest place to let it all out. It's the safest place to come home and be recentered. Here's what I want to tell you. The presence of God doesn't require your perfection. That's not what we see in the Bible. It doesn't require you to be perfect. This is why the psalmist is looking, saying, look at how good the presence of God is. I might be at a distance, but I know one day I'll be there. And if I can see that even the birds are going to be in that place, I think I can see that it is in fact a safe place. But I want to give you the full comprehensive picture on this. I want to make sure that as we're talking about this, that you're not missing any of this. So the third thing I want to tell you about the presence of God is this, is that being in the presence of God will confront my sinfulness. Now, I know this might sound a little bit random to put in here. It's one of these pieces that we would understand contextually as the writer was writing this, that the tabernacle itself, the presence of God, would have a sense of being dangerous. There's this fear that comes with the presence of God. This fear that existed from the very beginning. From the very moment that human beings sinned in Genesis 3, there was this sense of fear that was developed in human beings. Because and we read in Genesis 3, as God tried to show up to human beings, we ran, we hid, we tried to avoid God as much as possible. But I need you to understand the full context on this, is that the presence of God is dangerous to your sinfulness in the same way that medicine is dangerous to a cold. It's not dangerous in this sense of saying, you know what, it's going to destroy you. It's actually going to do one of the best things for you. The presence of God does something that we don't talk about enough. It's called conviction. Conviction is when God gives you a clear sense that something specific in your life is off and needs changed. Conviction is that moment you had if you ever decided to watch a movie with your parents that wasn't that good. I'm really grateful I never watched Titanic with my mother. I don't know that we would have recovered from that. I don't know that we would have ever, because I would have felt a lot of conviction, okay? I would have felt like, wow, this was a lot. Conviction is what happens with God in some moments whenever you're saying, I have a lot of bitterness in my heart. Conviction is when God will step in and will say, I know that what that family member said to you was so rude, but I need you to forgive them. Conviction is what happens whenever you're at work and it's 2 p.m. and you know that you end at 5, but you're ready to check out. I mean, come on, it's been a long day. Conviction is whenever you get back into the presence of God and you remember there's a reason for me to be here. I don't know, you could look at me and you could say, well, Colin, you work at a church, like, that's all it's supposed to be. I've worked in other places that aren't churches. I've worked in other places where I've felt at certain moments like, man, like I'm done. But can I just encourage you, when you're in the presence of God, you'll have a reminder of, I have a reason to be here. I have a reason. I'm not just convicted to say that I feel bad about myself. I'm convicted to know that there's something more. Some of us, when we get into the presence of God, we need to be remembering. We need to have these moments where we can sit and be able to say, God, you really have done so much more. You're really present. You're really here. It confronts my laziness. And I need you to hear this. The devil has attempted so much to twist and use this against so many of us, where we think that the conviction of God is there just to rip us to shreds. Where we think the conviction of God is there just to say, you're bad, I'm disappointed in you, I'm angry in you. What if this was changed? What if the conviction of God was there to confront my sinfulness, to say, I made you to be more than this. I made you to be better than this. I have something greater in store for you. Is it possible that maybe a lot of us need more of the conviction of God? Because I can tell you this, there's moments where I look back and I'm like, man, if I would have had the conviction of God, I would have avoided some dumb mistakes. I would have avoided some stupid things. I think our world could use a little bit more of the conviction of God, because at the end of the day, the conviction of God is trying to conform me, to change me to be more and more like Jesus. And there's nothing more that we need right now than to become more and more like Him. So we're talking about the presence of God, this safe place. What I want to lead you in this next moment is just something very different that you might not have ever experienced before. It's this thing that a mentor once taught me, of this practice of being silent and just being able to sit in the presence of God. What we're going to do here in a moment is I'm going to have you guys just close your eyes, but I want you to understand what this is. For some of you, as we've said, as we've been able to have these moments, we've recognized we've never maybe felt comfortable in God's presence. We've never maybe felt this sense of, man, like I can really just sit and breathe, because for a lot of us, even with our concept of I'm going to go home and I'm going to pray, it's this sense of I need to go and I need to talk for this amount of time. I need to do these different things. As the psalmist probably would have done as well, there would have been a lot of moments to just sit, just to be, not having to perform, not having to try, not having to get anyone's attention, not having to do anything beyond just be who you are. So what I would like us to do just for the next 30 seconds, if we could do that, I'm just going to ask you all to close your eyes. Just close your eyes in this moment. There's nothing happening right now, but I want you to visualize in faith just the reality that God's standing right in front of you. Jesus is looking at you, smiling. He loves you. He has so much hope for you. He is so happy to see you. He's looking at you, seeing his son and his daughter. As much as you might have thought that there was disappointment, that there was shame, he's looking at you right now, just seeing his son and daughter. I want you to just, for the next 30 seconds, just to be quiet, just to sit in that reality. Sit in the truth that you are in the presence of Jesus right now. I'm going to ask you to just keep your eyes closed for the next moment here. These moments right here, these ones just sitting in the presence of Jesus. I don't care if you've been following Jesus for decades, or today might be a moment where you feel like you're going to come home. These moments just being able to sit and being able to accept, I'm loved, I'm cherished. He sees you. He knows everything that's been going on in your life. And in these moments right here, I don't know if you can sense this right now in the room, there's just this heavy presence here that he's loving you so much. But I know for some of you, as we're talking about this, that you might have felt like I've completely walked away, or I haven't really made that decision. I want to give you a moment that's almost like a define the relationship moment with Jesus. A moment where you're no longer playing games, you're no longer going back and forth, but you're making a clear, definitive decision. Jesus is my God. I'm giving my life to him because I know that being in his presence is the safest place for me to be. If that's a decision you want to make, I'm going to ask you just on the count of 3 to put your hand in the air, not as a sign to anybody else except to Jesus, saying, I'm getting your attention. This is my sign. This is my moment. I'm choosing you. If this is a moment where you need to choose Jesus as your Lord, as your Savior, I'm just going to ask you to put your hand in the air. The count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Mom. This is such a special time. I'm just going to ask you to all pray just as we have our eyes closed in this moment. Just repeat after me. Say this. Say, Jesus, I believe in you. I believe you came to this earth, that you died on a cross, and you're alive today. I'm making a choice right now to give you my heart, to give you my life for right now and forever. I give you my life. Forgive me of my sins. I choose to follow you. Amen.